Wildling Press presents How Do I Book? Welcome to How Do I Book by Wildling Press. We like to chat about book writing, book publishing, book marketing, and, of course, book reading. We're trying to help new and experienced authors develop their craft, widen their perspectives, and learn to get a little wild every once in a while. I'm Christina.
And I'm Mike.
And again with us here today, we have returning special guest, Haley Simpkiss from Brandylane Publishers. Haley, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me again.
Thanks for coming back for Pride Month.
It's the best month.
Thanks for coming back willingly.
Willingly, yeah.
Well, you're giving me attention, so, you know.
Yeah, for the purposes of this episode, we're the gang, and it's like G-A-Y-N-G.
The gang.
With
The
like
gang. We might be. Are we too southern? Are we too southern for the joke to land? Does it just sound like we're saying gang normally?
Yeah.
My friend Alexis used to do a southern lady bit where she called the gays the guys. So I don't know. I don't know. I think maybe if you go too far south, it reverts back to guys.
I love that.
Anyway, happy flippin' Pride Month.
Happy
Pride Month.
I know we've been talking about it for a couple weeks, and we will continue to talk about it forever.
Hey, we're 3 letters of the alphabet. I'm down.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Oh, we're going to talk about those letters. We're going to talk about them.
We're going to get there. You just wait.
So today's topic is, how do I include the queer spectrum in my writing? And it's kind of funny because the answer is, it's like, just do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you book.
Today's episode.
3 days later, it's like, small publisher sued by Nike for stealing
Oh my God.
their motto.
Oh my God. Okay, well, I take it back. But really, I was like writing this, preparing for this episode, and I was like, I don't have any facts to share. I just want to spend a page and a half like emphasizing the importance. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll retitle this a page and a half about the importance of including the queer spectrum in your writing.
Well, like, it's hard to do like a how-to about this because it really depends on where you're approaching the issue from. Like, I'm not the kind of person who really thinks that, like, oh, no one can write about anyone whose experience, like, they personally haven't had. Like,
oh my God, Haley, that reminds me of last week's episode. Who can write queer characters?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a whole conversation.
Hosted by Mary Payton.
Woo! Shout out to Mary Payton.
Hey, Mary Payton.
Mm-hmm. Everyone knows about the LG.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Life is good? Or they make those cell phones?
I thought it just meant large. Like an abbreviation for large. It means large. Okay.
Let's go.
Oh, let's go. Mm-hmm. No, it's in LGBTQIA+. Everybody knows about the L and the L and the G.
Yes. Yes. You're doing great.
The letters are hard to keep track of.
Hey, I'm the old G. I'm the OG.
Okay, so LGBTQIA, that's 7 letters.
Yeah.
And under those letters are umbrellas, right?
Yes. Multiple umbrellas.
And so multiple umbrellas, like the umbrellas are holding umbrellas over other umbrellas.
Yeah, like, honestly, the way that the acronym came about is like, it's like a comedy of errors. Like, it starts off just like LGBT, okay? That's everybody. No, it's not. We've got intersex and asexual, okay? So we'll tack on I and A at the end, okay? Done. And then the non-binary people kind of don't feel like they fit under trans, and like kind of feel like they want their own thing. But like some of them do. But a lot of people kind of just prefer to go with queer because it's It's quick, it's easy, it covers it.
Queer is the final form, I think.
Well, and then you get the people who are like, yeah, but I personally have trauma associated with the word queer, and I kind of don't want to refer to myself as that. And they were like, okay, then we'll add
put
the
the plus
plus
symbol.
so that everyone is under it. You know who you are. You know who you are.
Yeah,
like
the alphabet mafia.
It really, I love that so much more than alphabet soup.
Yeah, for sure. Like all those things that Haley just said is why when someone tells you what their identity is, you say, "Thank you for telling me," and you don't have an opinion about somebody else's identity.
It's not your business to question it. It's your business to respect it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and even going back to you talking about people having a negative reaction to the word queer, you know, even me being of the end or on the cusp of Generation X to Millennial, you know, I grew up in a household, you know, where my mom would be like, Mike, stop being queer. You know what I mean? It means weird. Because of her generation, it meant weird, you know? So she's like, stop being queer.
Yeah,
and I'd look at her and she'd go, no, I don't mean that. I mean, stop being weird.
I think maybe like The Hobbit was the first book I read as a kid that like really used the weird queer like that. And I was like, oh.
I had to change my definition of it to LGBTQIA because I grew up with it with the old definition.
Right. And like there's a whole bunch of political stuff that like we don't really need to get into about like people campaigning against using the word queer within the LGBT community. It's TERFs. It's always TERFs. It's all TERFs. So like, yeah, because they didn't want everybody to have a nice little non-label umbrella to sit
Haley,
under.
Can you just say what a TERF stands for?
If you're not acquainted, TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. Again, there's like decades worth of history behind all of this, but these are
but we don't need to dig into it
we
too
really
much
don't.
in Pride Month.
No, like these are people who tend to either be. It's a lot of lesbians or people claiming to be lesbians because most lesbians are not like this. I cannot emphasize that enough, but it's a small but vocal minority of women who don't like the idea of trans women being around them because they just hate anything even associated with men. Like, again, very, very small, like, but vocal minority, and that's where a lot of the nonsense that gets aimed at trans people and trans women specifically comes from TERFs, and they kind of have an issue with anybody in the LGBT community who isn't just L or G, but like they also have a problem with G. They hate everybody.
It's kind of like, I maybe use the wrong terminology, so correct me, but it's kind of like bigots within your own community.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know?
All right.
But like
all of this
3
is true.
hours later.
like all of
this is good and true.
Yeah, and all of this is really just to say that like if you're scared of writing queer characters into your book because you're scared of making a misstep or saying something wrong or offending somebody, the queer world is not a monolith, and there's a lot of disagreement and infighting and different interpretations and reactions within the community in every corner of the community.
We talked about this last week some too.
Right. So
it comes up a lot.
Yeah, there it does come up a lot. It's kind of the main question surrounding representation right now. And the answer is that there's no one answer. So you can just ask people and do your best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. What I always say, like for myself, is like if you're writing an identity other than yours, like if I was writing, for example, like a Black character, it couldn't be a story about Blackness, right?
Right.
I can write a Black character, and I should write a Black character, and I should consult Black people about that character, but I'm not going to tell any kind of story about their identity as a Black person. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's the same exact way with queer people. They should be present in your stories. And if you're not from one or any of these groups, don't try to tell a story about what it's like to be in those groups. But that doesn't mean those characters shouldn't exist.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you can't, like with any character, writing involves empathy. So there is something about a trans person, if you're cis and you're writing a trans character, there will be something about their experience in life that you'll be able to connect to, even if it's something that in many ways is totally unique to their experience. And again, the big thing is to talk to people in the communities that you're trying to represent about, like, hey, am I super off the mark here? Like, how am I doing?
Yeah. This is about writing the queer spectrum. The reason that it's good to consider the entire queer spectrum is there's a couple things. One, the thing about the gays is they travel in packs.
We do.
Queer people have queer friends. Exhibit A, this episode.
Yeah. It doesn't even happen on purpose.
Queer people stick together for the same reasons that other people, the volleyball players stick together because they both have the shared context of volleyball. Queer people stick together because they both have the shared context of being queer, which is really, obviously, it's the biggest umbrella, but like it does foster friendships, trauma bonding.
Right.
Yeah, total trauma bonding, because all three of us are very different people. But we have this
totally different letters on the acronym.
Yeah, totally different letters. The G, the B, and the Q, if you don't mind me calling them out. But, but it's one of those things where, like, we have that common bond outside of our love for books, but we also have this common bond in our community that we can understand and identify things that, I would say that, like, the cis, straight world like doesn't understand that we can bond over even
the
just
dominant
with a glance.
Narrative, perhaps.
That's it. The dominant narrative. That's what I was looking
narrative.
for.
Ever since we interviewed Lucy Holland, everything's about the dominant narrative.
Yeah, and if you haven't listened to the interview, go back and listen to it. It's really
I'll link it in the show notes.
Yes, please do.
So if you don't include a diversity of queer characters, if you just have your like one gay best friend or like one gay couple, if you're like checking the queer box and you're like, I got my gay guy in or whatever, that's when you risk tokenizing that character.
Yeah, don't be trendy. Like, don't add a gay character because you think it's trendy. Make sure it's organic. Make sure that the person is, a proper part of your story. And if their sexuality doesn't make any sense in the story, don't include it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like a fine line because a lot of the times people's sexual orientation or gender expression is like not relevant to a story. But when you don't at least mention it, you run the risk of like cis straight people assuming that your characters are cis and straight. So if you intend to include characters that are different from you, you should say so specifically. But I think what you're kind of getting at more, Mike, is that like being queer is not a personality trait in that way. It's like not the only thing that they're doing is like being so gay. Like, oh my God, what's his name from Mean Girls?
Damien.
Yeah, Damien.
He was just in Richmond a few weekends ago at Drag Brunch and I missed him. My friend sent me a picture of him with him and I was like, really? Really? You got a picture with Damien?
Oh my
it's fine.
God. Doing drag for real?
No, he's actually in town filming a documentary, I think, on drag.
Whoa,
and
that's
so he was
fun.
there. I think the documentary's on drag. I could be wrong, but it was in a text message, that I read about it and it was weeks ago. But yeah, he was in town and part of it he was in Richmond, like filming the queer scene. Mm-hmm. Which Richmond has a great queer scene.
Yeah,
for
things
real.
people don't know about Richmond.
Exhibit A points at us.
Right.
We've got 3 whole queers.
Yeah, so when you are writing queer characters, you cannot be tokenizing a character if you have several queer characters. They're not going to be the token gay if you have like more than one gay. That's the problem with Damien in Mean Girls is that he's the token gay. And then what's her name? It's like a joke that she's like a lesbian because of the patriarchy.
Janice. And she says he's too gay to function, but only she can say that.
Only she can say that. Yeah. The reason that like, I really truly feel like the G in LGBTQIA, I feel like that has like a whole like generation of at least like exposure on the rest of the letters. Yeah. And that's because of the patriarchy.
Yes.
I'll never forget when my wonderful, beautiful, kind of sexist late grandmother said to me, you know what? The gays who live on my street are cool and fine. They come over and talk to me. They're really nice. I think it's okay to be gay, but lesbians. I don't understand those lesbians.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, Grandma.
Mm-hmm. It's all about evolution.
Yeah.
That's internalized misogyny.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure. I mean, I grew up with that same thing, you know. So, and it's luckily that landscape is changing.
It is changing.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to help make it change more. Like putting a spectrum of queer characters in your book will do a lot for you. Not to be this way, but I'm literally a book marketer. It will make your book more marketable. To today's contemporary readership, I won't read a book that doesn't have at least a little bit of gay in it. Yeah. It makes your book more diverse. You tell a variety of stories. You expose your readers to a wider variety of stories. It gives other people an opportunity to see themselves in the books they're reading, people who come from different identities than what you identify with. It's good all around for everyone if you do your best to include the queer spectrum in your writing. There's so many letters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I could jump in, one of the things for one of the books that I would highly recommend, it's a YA book that does cover the queer spectrum, is by Tanya Boteju, and it's called Kings, Queens, and In-Betweens.
Oh, I've heard that title.
It's a YA book, and it's really cool, and it's set in high school, you know, prom, and all those things like that.
Yeah.
But I just remember reading that book and just being like, I wish I had this when I was a teenager so that I would understand more about the spectrum outside of the L and the G.
Yeah. Another great book for that is Loveless by Alice Oseman, also set in, I think, like a first year of college setting. But just like, if you're trying to figure out your identity, read this book, you will find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like,
Same
honestly, that's what like representation comes down to. Like, that's why it's important is like, yeah, maybe you aren't gay or trans or asexual or intersex or whatever, but you've got readers out there. If you're really trying to get your book like into people's hands, and if you care about these kinds of issues, then a lot of people, the place where their journey of figuring themselves out begins in the stories that they love, because they get into those stories looking for a sense of I'm not alone. Even if they don't know why they feel alone yet, they get into those stories because there are characters that they feel some connection to. And if you are giving people a story that has characters who are in the process of figuring themselves out, or who have figured themselves out, who have an identity, who are working toward an identity, then that's going to give them that little bit of extra context and maybe give them an outlet to explore themselves.
Yeah, totally. And that's not to say that like your book should include 1 lesbian character, 1 gay character, 1 bisexual character, 1 transgender character,
Check.
1 intersex character, 1 asexual character, and 1, I don't know, non-binary character. It's not gay Lord of the Rings. We're not assembling for an adventure here.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily like a fiction writer's duty to educate the public on these matters, but representation, just wherever you can find a place for it in your story, and it's not that hard, that's going to mean something to someone.
Yeah, totally.
You're not collecting the Infinity Stones.
Yeah, so just do what feels authentic to your story without your story being authentically limited and closed-minded.
Yeah, and literally, if you're worried about something, if you're afraid of putting it in, if you just don't know where to start, just talk to people. Just find where they are. There are writing groups where people gather just to share this kind of information.
Yeah. Yep. I think there's also, if I'm remembering correctly, I think We Need Diverse Books has a really wonderful page of beta readers, diverse beta readers for all different kinds of
sensitivity readers are a big thing, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll link that in the show notes if I'm remembering correctly, and if I'm not, then I have edited this out. So Write as diversely as you can. That super includes the entire queer spectrum. Don't do a Tolkien gay. Wait, token. I said Tolkien.
Tolkien gay. I'm like, ooh, second lunch.
The Tolkien gays kind of do themselves. You know what I mean? Looking at you, Thranduil.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do a token gay and don't do a Tolkien collection of token gays.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
They're all after that ring.
And that's how you book. This episode was written and edited by me, Christina Kann. Our logo was designed by Michael Hardison. Our theme music was produced by Jason Hilton. Please check out the show notes for a link to the accompanying blog posts and visit us online at Wildling Press on social media or at wildlingpress.com.